Welcome to Here's My Thing, everybody. My name is Frankie Salazar, and today we're going to be talking about the recent and controversial cancellation of none other than Jimmy Kimmel Live. Now, today, as of filming, today is Wednesday, September 17th. Today marks 1 week, exactly 1 week to the day of the public assassination of political activist Charlie Kirk. Now, I had a lot of people that immediately following Charlie Kirk's assassination messaging me saying that my video or my segment of Here's My Thing was going to be very crazy and controversial and going to be quite wild because I had a lot to say on Instagram and my other social media platforms when it came to my opinion of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Just for the record, I think that despite it being such a controversial killing that the media, maybe not in the mainstream, but, a lot of the large talking points and political people in the liberal and leftist space, including those on late night television, had a very kind and remorseful response to his death, as I think anybody with any ounce of humanity in them should. And it's just unfortunate that today I find out that Jimmy Kimmel, per ABC, the network that hosts his show, was going to be canceling him, quote, indefinitely, meaning forever. There is literally nothing that Jimmy Kimmel can do to go back on the air over his controversial takes and conversations when it came to what he had to say about Charlie Kirk's assailant. Now, we're going to go ahead and play the clip in just a second. But what I do want to say is that what I had to find about what Jimmy Kimmel said about it, it wasn't the most controversial thing that I had heard. All he had to say about it was he was trying to peddle to people and his audience, although very left-leaning, with Disney Corporation being the founders, or not the founders, but the owners and operators of ABC, the network that hosted his show. The fact that his clientele, his viewers were very left-wing, he took it upon himself to make it a political talking point, saying that the assailant was, quote, one of them, being none other than a MAGA person. Now, that is just blatantly, disgustingly untrue. Not that it really matters, but this was somebody that was in a homosexual relationship with a transitioning person going from male to female named Lance Twiggs. And yes, although he was born into a Christian conservative household, it is possible, it is in the realm of possibility for somebody to defer from their political values of their family. Now, this kid was proven, per the governor of Utah, per the media, per his own volition, per the family of the transitioning boyfriend's understanding and testimony, that this was somebody that was radicalized by the idea being that Charlie Kirk was somebody that spread evil, nasty prejudices and agendas. I personally find that to be a disgusting representation of what people are alleging that Charlie Kirk had to say. But regardless of whatever Jimmy Kimmel had to say, I do not think that censorship is the greatest thing here. And we're going to go ahead and play the video right now so you guys can go ahead and see for yourself what he had to say verbatim.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. In between the finger pointing, there was grieving. On Friday, the White House flew the flags at half staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
So now that you guys have taken a second to go ahead and see what Mr. Kimmel had to say himself, this prompted a lot of backlash, so much so that Disney, the parent company of ABC, the network that Jimmy Kimmel Live was hosted on, had canceled his show indefinitely, and there's even rumors that they now want to federally investigate and potentially prosecute Jimmy Kimmel and the show. Now, what I don't understand is why. Why are we wasting federal resources to go after him in such an egregious manner? I think that the weaponization of the federal government is something that is crazy, even though Charlie Kirk, being one of the most influential political activists for the youth that we've seen in just recent history, I don't understand why we have to weaponize it as a group against the left. That doesn't make us, being right-leaning people, any better than them. And our president, of course, his favorite app being X and or, formerly known as Twitter, takes to Twitter saying, and I quote, "Great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel's show is canceled. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC. President DJT." So there's a couple of things that I want to address in here. Yes, Jimmy Kimmel's show was canceled, quote, indefinitely, per ABC. Kimmel has zero talent. I think that is arguably false and objectively false. I personally did not find him to be the most entertaining person. I think his writing was lackluster and his delivery was just frankly boring. And then he goes on to say that even worse ratings than Colbert, if that's possible. It quite literally is possible because The Late Show, hosted by Stephen Colbert, held the #1 spot of late night television, only being bested by right-wing commentator Greg Gutfeld for years now. Okay, he had almost twice the amount of viewership that Kimmel and Fallon had on any given day. So I don't know why he had to throw that in there, that if it's possible, because it quite literally is. Colbert kind of had late night by the balls for a couple of years now. And then he says here that all that leaves is Jimmy and Seth, who are with the fake news NBC. Now, Trump, listen, I've given you a lot of grace on a lot of stuff, but this right here is where I draw the line, okay? You leave Fallon out of this bullshit, okay? Now, for anybody that's a consumer of late night television or the mainstream media, we know that they are demonstrably against any sort of right-wing activism whatsoever, if not totally pandering to the left side, no matter what that even may be. But we know that based on Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel's shows for the past 10 years, every single waking day, they said Trump hundreds of thousands of times over the past 10 years, attacking him, attacking his supporters, and just quite literally rage baiting their audience into following them and building this crazy just following of people that hate Donald Trump. And what I don't like about him going after Fallon, and this is what pisses me off, okay, we're going to get into Here's My Thing just now. So we already know that ABC had gotten rid of Kimmel. And here's my thing on the whole topic, okay? What I don't like about it, what's pissing me off is, yes, Jimmy Kimmel was trying to weaponize people against one another again by blatantly lying and saying that Charlie Kirk's assailant was a MAGA individual. That is completely false. No matter which way you want to spin it, I don't care if you're on the left or right or this offends you. That is just unequivocally false for a couple of reasons. The things that were found on the shell casings of the bullets that the assailant had put, such as, "Hey, fascist, catch," which I don't think somebody on the right has said fascist in years. That was a left-wing propagandized word. And then also putting in his own text messages of his own volition to his transgender lover, okay? That is not somebody that is indicative of a right-leaning, crazy MAGA person. And by Jimmy Kimmel weaponizing that, I do think that it was just particularly nasty. Do I think he needed to be taken off the air? No. And this is what is pissing me off about it, because ABC, the parent company, is the Walt Disney Corporation. Okay? Now, anybody that knows the Walt Disney Corporation, they are now more so a soulless, just evil machine of just lawyers and propaganda, because we can see it. I took to Instagram tonight to say that if this happened 3 years ago, Jimmy Kimmel would still have his job, no matter how egregious the things that he had to say about Charlie Kirk was, because Walt Disney, just like Target, just like Walmart, just like all of these other clothing companies, all of these major corporations, for the record, just pander to the masses. That is what they do. The second that they get criticized on something, they're going to cower away and go, "Oh, we didn't mean that. That's not really what we meant." You know what I mean? They're going to try to pander to you all the way to the point where Snoop Dogg got in trouble for questioning why there were lesbians in a Disney child film. Disney had no reason to put lesbians in there. They probably didn't even want to. And as somebody in the community, I thought that it was cool to kind of see that kind of representation in film. I really did. People don't believe me when I say that, but I do. But my point is that Disney didn't do that of their own volition. They did that because they thought that that was what the all-powerful leftist agenda wanted. And lo and behold, people across the aisle, from middle ground right-leaning all the way to the psychopathic white nationalist MAGAs, boycotted that movie in an attempt to get Disney to really feel the heat about it. All the way to the point where we boycotted Target for billions of dollars in the event that they were promoting a transgender agenda. Now, do I think that these people need representation? Yes. But what I'm trying to get through to people's heads, especially people that are left-leaning or leftist or just people in my community or people of color, is that the government and these corporations could give a single shit less about you. And they're going to pander to you no matter what it is because they're spineless. These corporations could never take a stance on anything. 3 years ago when Biden and the leftists were in control, everything was gay, people of color, all that good stuff. Today, in today's world, where now the right people have now kind of taken the moral superiority here in the assassination of somebody in front of his children, even though they rightfully should. And Disney did not, they probably didn't want to get rid of Jimmy Kimmel because as far as I know, they weren't hemorrhaging money. Now, we all know that late night is something that is dying right now, but I think that Jimmy Kimmel was doing just fine. That was like their golden boy on ABC. Jimmy Kimmel is like an A+++ lister up there with Fallon and Colbert, but ever Colbert was let go, the implication was that it was politically motivated. I don't think so, but let's just say for a second that it was. Paramount was spineless because they got rid of him over the fact that he had the highest ratings in late night television, even though he made his entire personality about hating Trump and getting all of his supporters to hate Trump in the same movement by the millions. So, do I think that it was fair, and do I think that this is an egregious attack on the First Amendment? Yes, but the problem is, the First Amendment only protects you from the government. All that says is that you cannot be penalized under the law. ABC and the Walt Disney Corporation are private corporations and can quite literally let you go for any reason. And if Jimmy Kimmel has any sort of class to him, unlike our president, unfortunately, he'll just take this with grace. You've had your time and you've spent the last 10 years destroying the essence of late night TV by politically assimilating on it. And my personal beef, again, Trump, this is where I draw the line with you, motherfucker, because you leave Jimmy Fallon out of this. Now, yes, I do know that Jimmy Fallon also got on the Let's Hate Trump bandwagon, but not nearly as much. He and his writers just kind of made elementary school bully jokes about Donald Trump and all this stuff. And I think that Jimmy Kimmel, for anybody that knows him, not even just intimately, anybody that's watched an interview with him, that knows about his story, he has a very broken background, and his own insecurities are what were his primary motivation into making people laugh, and that's all he wanted to do. 10 years ago, he had Donald Trump on his show, who was a friend of the show, and he was talking about how inspirational being president was, and he was being friendly with him, and they were cracking jokes, and the next day, because of the backlash, because the world seems to hate Donald Trump apparently, even though they loved him. He was on Colbert, Fallon, Kimmel, The View, Oprah, The Apprentice. Everybody loved Donald Trump until he got in the race. And then all of a sudden, overnight, everybody hates Donald Trump. And now Fallon, at the behest of his executives, now has to turn his back on Donald Trump. He didn't want to do that. You cannot look me in my eyes and say that all of these people in the media just hate Donald Trump. No, it was what the executives wanted at the time, and because they're owned by these spineless executives, Fallon, in essence, had to turn his back on Trump 10 years ago. I mean, guys, it was literally, this is documented. This is literally overnight. He has Trump on his show one day. Let's just say it was a Tuesday. By Wednesday, he's making fun of Trump. And Trump took to Twitter. I'll go ahead and put the tweet up right now. I can't remember what it was, but he essentially called him a spineless man by saying, how could you have me on your show, laugh with me, make jokes with me, introduce me to your audience, congratulate me, and then backstab me the way that you did? So Trump has had a personal vendetta against Fallon for years now. And Colbert and Kimmel, they definitely pick their side. But I think at the end of the day, I think Jimmy Fallon, hopefully I've been saying his name the whole time. I'm a little wine tipsy from dinner. Hopefully I haven't been saying Kimmel this whole time. I think Fallon needs to be left alone in this, and I think his ratings have shown enough that people are over the propaganda bullshit when it comes to what the left and these soulless executives want to say as they're capitalizing on the backs of their writers and their beautiful golden children like Colbert, Kimmel, and Fallon. And I think Fallon himself, take Kimmel and Colbert out of this, and even Seth Meyers, Fallon just wants to make people laugh. And he's the reason that I even started my show, like him, and him and really Wendy Williams, who were both friends to Donald Trump before the crazy takedown happened. I think they need to be left alone. So Trump, you leave him alone. Stop calling for Fallon to be taken off, because he doesn't come against you nearly as much as Colbert and Kimmel did. And you've won. You've won. You've weaponized the federal government so much so to twist the arm of the Walt Disney Corporation into firing Jimmy Kimmel. Leave Jimmy Fallon alone. So that is all I have to say on the topic. And that's funny that I say that's all I have to say, even though we've been literally on air for over 17 minutes now. So clearly I had a lot to say about the topic. But at the end of the day, I don't think that Jimmy Kimmel should have been taken off air. But I do find the weaponization of trying to say that the assailant of Charlie Kirk had to be something that was politicized. Now look, I'll give it to you. People on the right were trying to make this a trans issue. Just because he happened to be in a homosexual or transsexual relationship does not mean that in and of itself was enough for him to murder somebody in front of thousands of kids on a college campus. Okay? That is not what's going on here. This does not have to be a trans issue. This does not have to be a right or left issue. But the fact that Kimmel can get online and say that it was a MAGA person just to get his followers riled up is something disgusting. Should he have lost his job for it? No. Should he have been criticized for it? Yes. And the viewers would have bankrupted him if they were mad enough anyway. But for Trump to weaponize the federal government against him to the point where they're threatening investigation, I don't know what to say anymore. But at the end of the day, this has been Here's My Thing starring Frankie Salazar. This past week has just been disgusting, from the stabbing of Irina Zarutska to the public assassination of Charlie Kirk to the potential lynching of Trey Reeds. We're all exhausted, and it just has to stop. And I think we're all exhausted, and as always, I would love to hear your thing on the topic. What do you think? Do you think Jimmy Kimmel had it coming? Do you think that this was just the executive's way of getting rid of him because they were going to get rid of him anyway? Or do you think that there's something more nefarious going on here and they're bending to the will of the Trump administration? So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe to become a baby Frank, and I will see you guys in the next one. Mwah.